Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat. He needs to get it done now. Blakey will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat. He needs to get it done now. Blakey will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat. He needs to get it done now. Blakey will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat. He needs to get it done now. Blakey will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat. He needs to get it done now. Blakey will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Yes, here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion.
Good evening, good people of the PSGL YouTube channel. Welcome along to what is PlayStation F1, and this is season number 40 for round 5 of the campaign. And we head to what I think both of us, as slightly biased British commentators might say, is the spiritual home of Formula 1. It is Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, and we come off the back of an Imola race that sets us up in a beautiful position in the championship standings. The top 3 covered by just a solitary point. and that leaves everything on the table going into the British Grand Prix. And the virtual commentary box for this evening is myself, Tom. Alongside me, as usual, it is Dan. How are you doing, my friend?
Very well, Tom. Thank you very much. And yes, I love the way you describe that mouth-watering prospect we have ahead of us for tonight, with the top three covered by, well, essentially the smallest possible margin, just 1 point covering 3 drivers. Extraordinary stuff. And as you said, we are at the cradle of Formula One for tonight. This is where it all began, and this is where we're going to go next here in PSF1. Can't wait to get it underway.
Hopefully it is a very exciting race, and hopefully maybe slightly less controversial than some other races that have taken place at Silverstone over the past few days. Going through the standings, as we've mentioned, though, there are some very exciting things to look at. If you look right at the sharp end, a win last week for Oscar at Imola, taking him a point clear of Owen, who had gone into the race with back-to-back victories but did not show up. A late absence for the Alpine man, leaving him a point behind, and Alex Lofer is yet to finish off the podium this season as well, winning the season opener, missing round 2 in Saudi Arabia, and a couple of second place finishes leaves him just a point behind the McLaren as well. Little bit of a drop off to the group behind. Tony Roche could have potentially won all 3 of the opening 4 races, the 3 races that he competed in, but just falling away in the latter stages means he's on 26 points, 2 ahead of Azim, with Volokong and Mario's Formula in hot pursuit as well. Like we mentioned earlier, Dan, the title battle, if these 3 can continue to compete at the level they have done so far, we could be in for an all-timer in the PlayStation side of PSGL.
We could certainly be. Of course, it's still very early days in the season, but yeah, these 3 have really established themselves. Between the 3 of them, they have taken every single first and second position in all 4 of the races so far. So they've been extremely dominant, which is very rare to see in PSF1, which normally has a lot more variety at the top. We've seen these 3 guys out there dominating, and while I'd say it's probably too early to start talking about who the title contenders are going to be this season, we are already a third of the way in, and we'll see how this is going to evolve from here. But yeah, 3 drivers who have been mighty impressive in each of the 4 rounds we have covered, and we'll see if there's more of the same at Silverstone. But I would say this track could throw up some opportunities for a change in the pecking order, because abilities, times, they all seem to be very close round here, so I can expect a bit of a mix-up tonight.
100%. Last week Imola qualifying was incredibly close, and you imagine we are going to see something very similar. Speaking of Imola, that was in the past. We're going to look to the present and the future by having a gander at what the calendar is going to be telling us. Round number 5 today at Silverstone. They've got a couple more before we break off at the end of August. The Hungaroring next week, an absolute sweat fest, I'm sure it'll be. And then we finish the second block of Season 40 at Bahrain. A week's break before we return for our 5-race stint to round out Season 40, the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, Suzuka, Las Vegas, Interlagos, and Mexico City to round off and potentially crown the champion, although don't be surprised if it goes to Brazil as well, because of the history that circuit's got. We know that there are a lot of champions that get crowned around the circuit of Interlagos. We are very close to getting underway, so I think what we should do is just have a little look at what the Silverstone circuit is like. You all know it, it's been around for so long, but if we have a look at the little track map that we've got loaded in, that's not the right scene. I think it should be that scene. That was a glimpse into behind the scenes. There we go, there is Silverstone. Good mix of high speed and low speed corners, some of the most legendary pieces of tarmac that we've seen in the F1 back catalogue. That was a bit of a mouthful to get out. Of course, Copse Corner. Sure, there's going to be some kind of collision in there, you would imagine. Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel as well. Dirty Air, how closely can you follow through that section in the middle sector? And how many overtakes will we see down to Brooklands and Luffield? 2 endlessly long corners. The tyres are going to be screaming for mercy. Opportunities to go up the inside or indeed around the outside. Let's return back to our faces, or my face, and a lovely picture of Dan. Yes, we've changed to the right screen. That is an ideal start. We've spoken about it a lot. Dirty air is the main aspect of this game. We know the strategies are there. We know that the racing can be slightly compromised, but the dirty air is the thing that has led to some of the battles that we've seen. Now, around a circuit like Silverstone, there are a decent amount of high-speed corners, albeit the first sector there's a decent number of slow-speed corners as well. I'm thinking about going through Village, through the Loop as well. How difficult do you think it's going to be to follow, in particular, through the high-speed corners from the run to Copse down to Stowe Corner?
Yeah, well, that run down towards Stowe Corner, I would say historically has been the main action point on the track. That is the clearest and cleanest overtaking spot. And this game, yes, it does make it a bit more difficult. I would also mention, though, the first two corners of the Maggots and Beckett's complex are so easy with these high downforce cars, and actually following through there is very, very simple. It's really the end of that section, in particular through Chapel Corner at the end, and I would say at the start of that section with Cops Corner. Those are going to be the ones where it's most difficult to follow, and if you can't stay close enough through Chapel, then obviously you're not going to be able to set up a run down the Hangar Straight going into Stowe Corner. I would still say, though, those are the action zones to look out for, and of course this track is at its peak in my opinion when you get a battle running from Stowe Corner right down to the Vale Complex at the end of the lap. I would also say we always talk about DRS trains as well in league racing, and if it's gonna break up, I would say it's usually at this track it breaks up because of a hard, fast wheel-to-wheel battle through that section where both cars lose a lot of time from running side by side. So we'll see if that is going to be decisive in this race. But I mean, we've said it so many times, it is that dirty air, and we're going to get a first-hand look at how that is going to affect racing here at this legendary circuit.
I think you raise a really good point about Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, because I think going into Chapel, you can maybe just get slightly ahead of yourself because of the speed that you can carry through Maggots, through Beckett's, even with a little bit of dirty air thrown into your face. And that's usually the part where we see drivers making the mistakes. Maybe they run slightly too wide out of Beckett's, trying to carry too much speed into Chapel, or get maybe slightly on the curb on the inside or the outside and just losing the back end ever so slightly. Got to be careful of the tyre temperatures as well. Going to be putting heavy loads through that middle sector, as we said, and the tyre wear also. One stop will be the main aspiration for a lot of the drivers if it is dry, of course. Will the two stop be fast? We haven't seen too many venues on the calendar, or on the game at least, where the two stop in a 50% race is the best way to go over the one stop. If there's going to be a circuit, you think maybe China's one of them, but Silverstone, with the wear and the strain you're putting through that front left tyre, could potentially be one of them.
It could be, but I would actually say that Silverstone is, generally speaking, quite a low-deg circuit on this game at least. And so I think the one-stop should be fairly simple. You're probably not going to see the soft tyres being run in the race, of course. But the hard tyres at this track can, for all intents and purposes, pretty much go on forever. So I do think that strategy is going to be relatively simple. I think what could throw a bit of a spanner in the works, if we do get a dry race, of course, this is Britain after all, but it could be the lap you choose to pit. With typically cars will run very close here at this circuit. Where you pit could make a very big difference, and because you do get a little bit less tyre wear here than at some other tracks, where you do decide to pit, and you could see pit stops starting from very early in the race, could make a big impact on your track position. It certainly did at Imola. That's how we saw the complexion of that race being changed up. So watch out for strategies. Of course, it is going to play a big role tonight.
I think the other detriment that's going to be to the two-stop is something similar to what we saw last week at Imola, and it's that the pit lane is so slow, egregiously slow, some might say, that you don't want to be wasting that extra 30 seconds by making the extra stop, because the likelihood is in a 26-lap race, you're probably not going to make that time back up. When is the race starting? Cheese says you said hello to us earlier on in the session, so thank you very much. The beeps are coming in my ear and the green ticks are coming up, so we're about 30 seconds away from qualifying getting underway. And if you are new to PSGL, which I don't imagine you are, because you know about what happened in the PC F1 race that took place at Silverstone a few days ago, 18-minute qualifying session that we'll be working our way through before the 50% 26-lap race around this legendary circuit that'll come up in about 25 to 30 minutes time. 25 seconds on the clock before we get going. So the drivers starting to ready up. The drivers with the worst internet connection probably taking that a little bit longer and just holding us at bay, but the anticipation can continue to build and we'll get our first reveal. In fact, I'll bring it up for everybody. We can have our first reveal as to what the weather will be doing in Act 1 of our Silverstone weekend. Will it be dry? Will it be wet as we load into qualifying? Put your bets in, everybody. I think it'll be dry for qualifying. That's usually the way it goes. Dry qualifying, wet race. I've seen a lot at Silverstone on this game. I could be proved entirely wrong when this black screen disappears. It is dry, so we've got the first 50% right.
It is rather overcast. We'll see if it does actually change throughout the session, in which case these guys are going to have to get laps in quite quickly. Yeah, obviously, I would say, as opposed to fully wet races I've seen around here, it is that changeable condition, either wet to dry or dry to wet. That usually dry to wet, I found in my experience, tends to be what you get from Silverstone. So that is what's to come later on. Potentially, we've got to keep a close eye on this, guys. I think it will hold off though for this session. We're going to get the best of these drivers here at a fully dry Silverstone circuit that these guys are going to take on. So 18-minute qualifying session now underway. These guys are going to hammer it round this iconic track, and we'll see who's going to put up the best mark. One thing I do want to mention going into this, a little statistic from the opening 4 rounds. Alex Lofer, the Spaniard, who's right in the midst of that title fight, he has contested 3 races throughout this season. He has 3 pole positions so far from all 3 of the races he's contested. So if there's one man to watch for this session, he may be it. But as I said earlier, there could be a mix-up here. So there's 20 very hungry drivers out there. Let's see how they're going to take on this circuit.
He has been our qualifying master, but not quite able to translate it into race victories. Obviously, he's been on the podium in all 3 races that he started, winning the season opener in Austria about a month ago, and then a couple of second places after missing round number 2. Here is our championship leader, CSI Oscar, piling through Copse Corner on his outlap. We're home to try and get some tyre temperature into those soft compound tyres to allow him to blast round his first qualifying lap of the session. With 18 minutes on the clock, you would expect 3 runs. That is the main aim for a lot of our drivers in this qualifying session. Did I say CSI? He's not part of Crime Scene Investigation. SCI Oscar. New team on the block. You're absolutely right. I've created my own esports outfit there. But it is the championship leader, Oscar, making his way around Stowe Corner for his first qualifying lap of the session.
So we shall see how he's going to get on any McLaren driver, opening up that run towards the line, getting onto that overtake button and through. Cuts the beam to get this lap time kicked off. Now, opening part of the lap, very, very simple. Shifts down into 7th gear to try and avoid much of the speed scrub, heading through Abbey Corner, onto the brakes now into Village. A little bit wide of the optimal line, I do think. Tough braking zone to nail as he heads into the loop, keeps it in 3rd gear, looks for better traction on the way out, back on to the overtake button and opening up the DRS. So let's see how he does. Barreling down the Wellington Straight. You should be in around that 27-second mark, and he is. A 27 flat to the first sector, manages to get that second apex there in Brooklands Luffield, a seemingly endless traction zone on the exit. How early though he is able to get on the throttle, you just have to marvel at. Now heading in towards this famed high-speed section of the track, shifts down into 7th gear again through Copse Corner to avoid that speed scrub. He's using a lot of the battery too, already used a substantial amount as he heads through the famed Maggots and Beckett section, nearly flat through 3 of those 4 corners. Out of Chapel Corner, keeps it nice and clean between the lines. 101.8 is looking very, very solid in terms of a banker lap. So here he comes flying into Stowe Corner, just a little dab of brakes on the way in, punching out of the way out. Now he's used pretty much all of his battery, but we're heading towards the Vale Corner. Oh, we just missed one coming over the line. The kick-server of Silo has just come through then, so didn't get the first lap of the session. We will get the second though on behalf of Oscar, and he goes about a quarter of a second quicker. 1:25.2 to get his session kicked off.
Championship leader starting strongly. Finlay as Fraser cuts the beam to go 3rd faster to the 3 times we've got so far. Immediately replaced by Marius Formula in the Alpine. Finlay's had some really strong qualifying pace so far. Speaking of strong qualifying pace, there's Alex Lofer trying to make it 4 poles out of 4 appearances, and he's the first into the 25 zeros. Puts nearly 2/10 of a second between himself and the championship leader. Round Vale chicane we go with Finlay. Now just club corner to negotiate, cutting the beam in the Haas, and he jumps up into 3rd, 9 milliseconds ahead of the Kicksauber of Clara. Now immediately bumped down as the times continue to flow through. It's Ryder out with a 25.3. And we've got our 3 main championship protagonists in these early stages, filling the top 3 places after 5.5 minutes. Owen slots into 3rd on a 25.2.
Yeah, it is the usual suspects, you could say, up at the front, and well, the usual suspect of qualifying this season, currently at the top by the tune of nearly 2/10 of a second. He dominated qualifying last time out in Imola, and we'll see if there will be more of the same later on. So we'll track other cars around the lap. I believe the Ferrari of Dirk is heading up towards the end of his first flyer in the Ferrari. Of course, he's had races this season where he's been up at the sharp end. I remember him from that race in Spa where he was right up the front, Coming up towards the line in the Ferrari, he goes to P8 on a 125.4, and a lot of drivers converging around that mid-25 mark. Tom, I pegged the pole time to be around about a 24.8, although maybe Alex is going to make me pay for that prediction once again with how quick his banker lap is. High 24s, I would say, is probably the magic number in terms of where you need to be if you want to be right up at the sharp end of the grid. So Alex pretty much there. A lot of drivers, I imagine, will have that kind of speed in hand, and we'll see if they can access it later on. But I do think that if you want to be really up there, you probably want to be getting into the 124s. So let's see if anyone can hit that magical mark and really stamp their authority on this session.
100%. I think that'll be the mark that everybody will be aiming for. Alex Lofer, maybe not. He'll be going for maybe a mid-24 if he continues to show the pace that we've seen so far in qualifying. Lafferty yet to get a time on the board. Looked a little bit wobbly coming through Maggots, Becketts and Chapel, but straightens it out coming past the third section of that beautiful sequence of legendary corners and barrelling up towards Stowe Corner now. Got to be as committed as you possibly can. Doesn't quite make the apex, but using a decent amount of track on the exit, and now just 3 corners to go, 2 of them coming up in tandem, taking a lot, mounting the first part of the sausage curve going through the Vale chicane, but doesn't seem to affect the car too badly traction wise. As we cut the beam with the RB, so it's just inside the top 10, 125.5 for Lafferty on that occasion.
I do think there's much more time in the tank because we already managed to clock quite a few errors on that stretch of road just in the second half of the lap. So I think Lafferty's got plenty more in the tank, as I imagine most of these drivers do. We are, of course, still very, very early days in the session, just coming up on 7 minutes gone here in qualifying. So 15 of the 20 drivers do have times on the board. A couple of drivers have had to bail out of runs as well. And of course, we talk about this every week as well, Tom, but there is that added degree of pressure if you don't get a solid run in. I mean, look at Nico, nearly 3/10 adrift of the rest of the grid, and these guys who haven't quite had times yet, that pressure is going to mount with every single run. And I can speak from my own league racing experience. Having a good first run sets you up for success so well throughout the rest of the session. You're not chasing, you're already well established in the session, and there's so much more freedom in the runs to come. But if you look at the top of the timesheets and the riders, I was looking at Ryder Dahl's name, that's why I said that. You look at the drivers who have already got very good times on the board. It is those same drivers we've seen up at the front throughout this season. Right? You mentioned those 3 championship contenders. You also look at the likes of Ryder Dahl, who was right in the mix in that race in Imola as well last week. So yeah, it is the same drivers, as we saw once again, being able to get the early laps in, execute much more cleanly, and they've got that almost their carte blanche to go for it in the final runs to come.
And it's like you said as well, we've seen it so many times this season also, those drivers that have a very solid banker, as Azam really hustling the car through Maggots, Becketts and Chapel. You can see the rear end desperately trying to step out, but keeping it on the straight and narrow in a decent middle sector for the Williams as he looks to get his first flying lap on the board just under halfway through the session. But yeah, the weight that comes off your shoulders on that final run of qualifying, if you've got a decent bank lap in, if you're inside the top 5, you can really go for it. Whereas if you're someone like Tony Roche maybe, who doesn't have a time on the board after the first runs, needs to try and get something here. If he doesn't get a run on the board again, as Azam is going to go P5 with a 25.3. Good lap time there from Azam, who's been consistently inside the top 5 or 6 this season so far. But if you get to the end of the qualifying session and you don't have that banker, you maybe just leave a little bit of time on the table thinking, maybe I've just got to be a bit more cautious here, get this lap on the board, because you don't want to go through the embarrassment, and I will call it embarrassment, of having 3 lap times either invalidated or making mistakes on.
Yeah, and I've certainly done both of those things, so don't be doing that. But of course, these drivers are the best of the best on the PlayStation platform, so we can expect great things out of a lot of them, I am sure. We're getting just past the midway point of the session, so action is starting to kick back up again as these drivers look for better and better performance out there. Alex Lofer still on top of Oscar and Owen, and I want to talk about Tony Roche in the meantime, who currently sits, as you said, without a lap time, because we've stressed how tight it is at the top between those 3. Tony Roche has, in terms of on-track being involved in the battles and in the qualifying sessions, he has consistently been right in and amongst it and could have easily won all three of the races he attended, as you said earlier. So he's a driver who, well, we've talked about those three. I think he certainly belongs in that conversation as well, just in terms of raw speed. He's certainly got the goods to be in amongst it. It's just about putting it all together. So we'll see how he can get a lap on the board and join the three musketeers at the front. But he's always going to be a driver to watch in this qualifying session. Exceptionally quick, both over one lap and in race time, of course.
No improvement for Alex Lofer through the first sector, just under half a tenth down, but in the 26.9s, that's some serious wheels in that first sector, and I wonder, this you would imagine is on a used set of the soft compound tyres. Is there that much more performance? Just touching the grass on the run up into Copse Corner, peaks it pinned in 7th gear as he attacks the legendary high-speed corner. Mario's Formula displaces his teammate inside the top 3, half a tenth separating the two Alpine cars. Alex Lofer negotiating Magus Beckerson Chapel. Didn't look the best, it has to be said, and yeah, nearly a tenth and a half down, so that's definitely the tyres just starting to drop off. What about Oscar just behind? He's nearly 0.2 of a second down, so clearly difficult to get two very competitive flying laps out of these soft compound tyres. The likes of Alex Lofer and Oscar struggling. We can look at where Owen is as well. He's found a little bit in the first sector, but has been bumped down into P5 now as the Kicksauber of Clyro, the next driver to join the 1 minute 25.2 club. We'll see what Owen's middle sector split is, and he's up by a tenth of a second, so hold your horses here. Alex Lofer and Oscar failing to improve on their second attempts. This could be Owen reasserting himself. Was the championship leader before Imola. He missed the round 7 days ago. This could be his warning shot to the likes of Alex Lofer and Oscar as we approach the Vale chicane.
Oh, he struggled to get the car turned in there for the Vale complex. A little bit of rear locking, had to bring it back. Has he managed to keep a hold of it, though? He has. He loses a tiny bit of time in the last sector, but he does manage to see it through and get onto the provisional front row. I have to say, his run through Stowe Corner was beautiful. He used the absolute maximum width of the track as Zinedine Hajjaj and the Kicksauber goes up into P6, joining his teammate on the front row. Good going from both of these guys who we haven't seen much of throughout this season, so going strongly. As I said, there's a couple of new drivers who are managing to get themselves in and amongst it here at Silverstone, a track which does reward a different sort of skill set, I would say, to other tracks. You can see different drivers excelling here, but is still largely the same names who are right at the sharp end. Good improvement from Owen, though. Still keeps himself right in the mix, and of course he's still going to be riding a crest of the wave. Of course, did not compete in the last round in Imola, but don't forget, he is still coming off of the back of 2 straight wins from the last 2 races he contested. So while he did have his championship lead slashed in the last round, he is still a driver with much momentum on his side, and I imagine he's not going to be having that championship lead taken away. I don't imagine it's going to be playing on his mind much at all.
Haas are not taking the optimal run through Stowe Corner. In fact, invalidates on the exit, and that is not good news at all for the Williams. And he's in a situation that we were talking about 5 minutes ago. Hasn't got a flying lap on the board going into the death parts of the session, right at the end of the qualifying session. The 18-minute timer will be coming up very, very shortly, and that leaves him under some added pressure. The same for Tony Roche, who did get a second run in, but 25.8, nearly 0.8 of a second down on Alex Lofer. He needs to try and find a little bit more pace. Now, I apologise to Silo. This is the second time that I've got pronunciations absolutely wrong. Letters, as it turns out, very, very difficult. Apparently, I called them Kleiber or something, which is not even in the same ballpark of what it is. Got 3 of the letters right, but got them all in the wrong order. So apologies to the Kicksauber, nestled very nicely in P6, just ahead of their teammate Zinedine.
Yeah, as I said, it's those Kicksaubers going very well, as we got Yasuo Saki retiring. That looks to be in the pit lane, so maybe no more fresh sets of tyres to use. In fact, I'm not quite sure why that is actually, but he will not have a time on the board throughout this session. Meanwhile, I'm watching the Williams of Azem navigating his way around, as you said earlier, Tom, remarkably consistent across the opening rounds of the season, and takes a beautiful line heading through Chapel, just half a tenth up, but if you look at the times, that is still looking for a solid bump up the leaderboard. He hasn't got much battery to use, though, as he flicks it into Stowe Corner. Keeps it in 6th gear. We've seen most drivers opting for 5th through there, but he decided it wasn't quite good enough for him. He bows out of that lap, heads into the pit lane.
That's what happens when you pause. That's what happens when you pause on pit lane entry. Happened to Tom 97, I think, previously, jumping into the pit lane and pausing, and the AI drives you into the wall. So that's some front wing damage. Thankfully as well, we can see the timer, 3.5 minutes to go. I think he probably thought that he wasn't going to get back round for a final attempt.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Of course, it does depend on the tyres, what you've got left to use as well. But I would say with 3 minutes left in the session, Cazzezel is just returning to the pit lane, and the Aston Martin has just over 3 minutes to the good. It's going to be somewhat tight, but I think it should be doable for all the drivers still in the session to get back out there. And one driver is already getting back out there. That looks to be the second McLaren of Volakongen. Now, this Norwegian, typically very, very strong in terms of pace, very, very clinical in the race, and he was rewarded with a great drive through the field to a podium last time out in Imola. Always seems to find himself in the points, and usually very strongly in the points, so he could have a good lap in his blocker too, currently sitting in P8, but still that time, that banker lap from Alex Lofer remains the top time in the session, and I thought we'd be seeing 24s. I think the 24s are still to come potentially, because we've got a lot of drivers heading out on fresh tyres and with a steely determination to drive them down this circuit, so I think we're going to see fireworks on these final runs. It's going to be a cracker. Alex still holds that top spot by about a tenth and a half, but I do think there is plenty more speed in this circuit, Tom. I do not believe for a second we've seen the last of the improvements in this session.
Going to see the heavy metal driving coming out right at the end of our qualifying session. But look at the gaggle of cars coming through Brooklands and Luffield on the track map. They're going to have to space themselves out. What Volakongen has done is he has given himself some really nice track space. The only problem is he might catch a few of the drivers on their outlap. I'm looking at the Aston Martin and the Ferrari in particular that are only just coming out of the pit lane. Volakongen, like you said, immaculate consistency. Scored points in 11 of the last 12 PSGL PSF1 races and picked up a very, very good podium. Ended a bit of a podium drought as well. He's somebody that usually has found himself finishing inside the top three on a number of occasions in his PSF1 career, but a little bit of a drought that he ended there. But with 1 minute and 21 seconds to go, Volakongen blasts through Abbey for the final time in this qualifying session as he looks to try and find his way potentially inside the top three. Can he get as close as possible to his teammate, maybe get into the 24s? We were talking about Alex Lofer trying to get into the mid 24s. Didn't quite make the step from his first flying lap to the second flying lap, which we've usually seen in this PSGL PSF1 season 40 of course. So maybe a little bit disappointing for himself there, but at the end of the day, he still has a tenth and a half in his back pocket over anybody else. And Volakongen improving by about a third of a tenth through the first sector.
I was hearing those tyres squealing constantly on board with the McLaren driver as he really pushed the boundaries to the slow speed section of Village, and the loop as he heads flat out into Copse Corner, keeping it pinned back on that overtake button, heading towards Maggots and Beckett's, carrying the speed through well over 300 k's an hour, just under 200 miles an hour as he flies it through, keeps it nearly flat out to the third, can't get in through Chapel, manages to keep it well within the track limits, it must be said. He is finding a good time out there though, and at the moment a tenth and a half, you could be looking at a professional front row. So what's the last sector going to be looking like? He doesn't use as much of the curb as some others on the entry and a little bit wide of the apex. Is that going to cost him significantly? Onto the brakes for the final time in the lap, into Vale, just misses the sausage curb on the inside, tight line to the second part, manages to recover it, good traction on the way out. Volakongen goes into second position. He held the time through that last sector, goes up onto the professional front row, but there's a lot of drivers circulating out there who are going to look to try and topple those times.
Alex Lofer not improving, matching his personal best. Needs a brilliant final sector. Does he find it? Yes! Good final sector, finds a tenth of a second, and is the first driver to break the 125 barrier. 24.9 is the time for them to chase, and Owen isn't improving either. The main perennial contenders to this Silverstone throne struggling. Silo up into P4, excellent lap 25.1. Finlay joins him inside the top five. What can Oscar do? Championship leader, rounding club corner. He doesn't improve, and he's sixth place at best. What about Owen? He's struggling to find time. The Alpine spins it over the beam, and it's going to be third at best for himself. Marius Formula has shown a real good turn of speed. He's up by over a tenth of a second. Can he maybe get onto the front row? Dislodge Alex Lofer perhaps? He can't. Still not into the 24s, but a 25.1 pushes Volakongen down to third.
Up to the line comes the Mercedes of Lawrence, currently 17th, jumps up into position number 12. Behind you have the Ferrari. Nico Sos goes up in a 14th position, finds just a little bit of time out there. Next up, it's Zenedine. He remains in position 10, found an improvement, just not quite enough. Then Lafitte in the RB goes up into 13th. They are flashing across the line, but nothing really challenging the top guys. Ryderdahl's gone off at Vale. We'll see nothing more out of him, and it's Cazzezel in the Aston Martin, and I think that is going to be at. Kazezel jumping up, I think, to just outside of the top 10. In the end, the banker laps we saw ended up being very, very competitive. We didn't see quite as much improvement in evolution across the session as we expected, but it's that man, once again, Alex Lofer. I think every lap he did in this session would have been good enough for a pole. He just cannot be stopped in a qualifying session at the moment, Tom.
Yeah, nearly 2/10 clear, and he might even be a little bit disappointed with a 24.9, considering his banker lap was a 25 flat and only found a 10th of a second as the session progressed. Good from Marius Formula, gets onto the front row, continues his good form along with Volokongan in P3. Jerome, solid lap for the Mercedes P4 ahead of Owen, and then Silo in P6. Finlay, Oscar, Ryder, Allen, Zidane rounding out your top 10, covered by just under a third of a second. Asm ahead of Dirk, Kazizel, Lawrence, and then we go down Lafferty, Nico Source, Tony Roche, Fraser, Hazara, and Yasisaki not getting a lap time on the board. PB for Alex Lofer, I believe that is Alex Lofer, was a 0.7. Didn't need a 0.7, mate. You were still comfortably clear of everybody else.
Yes, indeed. It does just show the margin he has over one lap. A very similar gap to P2 as we saw last time out in Imola. But of course, that race, he was not rewarded with a race victory, and Silverstone is one of the most difficult tracks on the calendar to break away. Even on this game, F125 with the increased dirty air, I still think he's going to have a very hard time breaking away from the rest of the train, especially as we are going to have DRS, because rather surprisingly, Tom, the weather is absolutely beautiful out on track.
Who would have put money on back-to-back, what are effectively days, Saturday and Sunday, for the British Grand Prix being completely clear? Weather set fair, which is absolutely lovely to see. That means we don't have to think about the inters or the wet compound tyres, which is a very, very good thing, I think, for a lot of the drivers out there. Alex Lofer taking pole position. That is 4 poles out of 4 for the Red Bull Racing driver in the 4 races that he has competed. But can he convert it into a second win of the season? We're not too far away from finding out. His main championship rivals a little bit further back as well. Oscar not finding an improvement on his final run of the session. Same with Owen. I don't think Oscar improved in his second or third runs in that qualifying session. So it was his first run right at the start of the session that ended up being his best time, which just puts him a little bit out of position, you would say.
You would think so, but I think this is, again, a track where you do generally see just some drivers finding a little bit more speed compared to relatively to other tracks. So Silverstone does throw that up in the air, but yeah, seeing Oscar down there in P8, Tony Roche way down the field, didn't seem to have any speed at all in that session. So you'd have to say it's a golden opportunity for Alex Lofer here. He sits in the perfect spot up at the front of the field. Marius Formula, the man from Cyprus, just trailing him on the grid off of that front row. So yeah, it's a magical opportunity for Alex Lofer, but there is 26 laps of this incredible circuit ahead of us. And, well, I'm sure, Tom, you've covered enough league races throughout your time commentating and racing as well that, yeah, the qualifying does not translate to the race. Here we go.
Not always. Short run down to Abbey, but you don't break until you get to turn 3 of Village. Red Bull versus Alpine is Alex Lofer ahead of Marius Formula as we are racing for the British Grand Prix. And the Red Bull looks to have it covered, and Marius Formula left standing at the start. Round the outside goes Volokong, and Owen nipping at the heels of his teammate as well. And the driver that started from second already knocked out of the podium places. Alex Lofer comfortable down into the first braking zone of Village. Big cluster of cars behind. We've got a spinner right at the back. A lot of cars caught up. Lafferty missing his front left tyre. There's a Williams of Hazard, I think it is, backwards as well. And that is not good news. Lafferty lasting all but 3 corners. It was actually Kazizel that's missing half of his front wing that was off in the pickets with the RB. It was comfortable for Alex Lofer. Marius Formula not getting off the blocks. And then a big, big cluster right at the back.
Yeah, as it so often is the case here at Silverstone, that big braking zone heading into Village Corner, creating a lot of trouble, of course. It's difficult to navigate even Abbey and Farm as you head through any big pack of 20 cars. And yes, unfortunately, Lafferty is the main victim of that, and several other cars getting caught up, getting damage, at least in Kazezel's case, relegated to the back of the field. I also think, yes, there's Fraser with damage as well as Lawrence. So lots of drivers getting caught up there in that melee down there in the very third corner of the race, changing things up at the back. So as we've seen so often throughout this season, it's relatively serene at the front, but further down the field, all hell does indeed break loose. As we head to the end of the first lap, I am wondering if we're going to see anyone diving to the pit lane. I doubt it, because I still don't think that the hard tyres will go the distance, so it's not going to have much of an impact on strategy, at least for the drivers who did avoid damage on that first lap, but many were not able to, and we're still going to have a very busy pit lane, Tom.
Yeah, we've got drivers coming in that don't necessarily have damage either. Haas, one of them, doesn't have any front wing damage on the Williams, but there is a lot of carbon fibre that was scattered across the circuit down into Village on the opening lap of this Grand Prix. The leading group of, 11 cars all staying out. Tony Richet into the pits. He didn't have a very good qualifying. Needs to try and make something back. Could this be the ticket that takes him right to the sharp end of the field in the latter stages of this Grand Prix? I concur with what you think. The hard compound tyres definitely cannot do 25 laps of this circuit, especially with the load you're putting on that front left in the middle sector alone. So they're going to have to hope that these hard compact tyres treat them very nicely. They can make their way back through the field. The benefit for somebody like Tony Richet, Yasser Saki, is they're right at the front of this group of cars that have pitted under the safety car. So Tony Richet will be first on the scene, really, to try and attack the likes of Ryderdal, Zinedine Azam, who did stay out.
They have a little bit of time to get temperature in the tyres before they catch the main safety car train. Interestingly enough, one driver has deviated from that hard tyre strategy. Kazizel, who I think also went off strategy at Imola too, goes out on a set of the medium tyres, so we'll be looking to gain a bit of track position in the first couple of laps after we do get back underway, which I'm hoping will be at the end of lap 3, but we shall see as the rest of the drivers will work their way back towards the train. As for the medium runners, well, they're already behind that safety car trying to preserve as much tyre temperature as we can, and eventually we should get the race back underway. So Tony Richet managing to, well, I think he was one of the drivers who didn't pick up damage on the first lap, so he's gone a little bit deviant on strategy, and he's going to try and take these hard tyres as long as they will physically go. We shall see what the strategy is going to be looking at like. They're going to get themselves back in play very, very shortly. We should get racing back underway. So what we're going to be treated to, Tom, is essentially two separate races, two separate, very different strategies out there, with about a third of the grid opting for the hard tyres. It's going to create a bit of factions out there and different strategies to keep our eyes on.
Well, 100%. And it's going to be interesting because the hard tyres traditionally on this game, the front tyres in particular, are very difficult to get the energy through after a safety car restart, get the tyre temperatures starting to come up so you get the optimal grip from the front axle. But around a circuit like this, where you are putting a lot of load through the front left tyre in particular, but also through the front right, that might be a bit of a golden ticket, as we said before, for the likes of Tony Richet and Yasser Saki to really try and make an impression when the safety car comes into the pits and the restart gets us underway. And for Mario's formula, he'll be hoping that it is a very much different formula to what happened off the start. Just didn't get out of the blocks at all. Volokongan absolutely blasted past him, and then his teammate put him in his back pocket comfortably round the outside of Abbey turn number 1. They had absolutely no answer down into Village. Whether he would have got the opportunity to get back past his teammate on the run down to Brooklands, we will never know, of course, because the safety car came out and disrupted any chances of a recovery job for Marius Form. And also, good day to one of the absolute goats of the scene, the undisputed goat of the scene. It is George Morgan. Hope you're doing very well, George.
And also out there on the track, then you can see Mario's formula. One thing I wanted to mention about him was, of course, he doesn't have to worry about getting off the start line, at least this time, not accelerating from a standstill. And I don't think you're going to see many changes of position. You typically don't see many on safety car restarts on this game, especially with these drivers at this level. They're very unlikely to get caught out there. So Mario's formula could very much stay in the game. We know from qualifying he does have plenty of speed to use, as though does our race leader Alex Lofer, and we'll see how he's going to handle. I would imagine we should get the race back underway, as the entire grid is now stacked up in this safety car queue and raring to get back to racing, as there is the call from race control safety cars in this lap. And well, it's a relatively short final sector. You don't have many options in terms of choosing places to accelerate, but we'll see if Alex Lofer can catch out Volokongan and the rest of this field, as now he guides them along, waiting to get this race back underway.
Pole sitter backing the pack up, allowing the safety car to disappear off into the distance. Might be the first safety car that we've had this season, because it has been quite clean for the most part, but we'll reflect on that later as Alex Lofer negotiates Stowe Corner at a very sedate pace. He will try and catch the group behind him unawares. Is there an opportunity perhaps for somebody like Owen or Marius Forman to pounce if Volokongen perhaps is caught out by the restart. Alex Lofer decides to bolt before we get to the Vale chicane, but it looks like Volokongen is wise to his tactics and goes with it. But the McLaren massively jumping over the sausage curb in the second part of the Vale chicane, could leave himself vulnerable as we cut the beam to start lap 4 of the Grand Prix. Heading down to Abbey Corner, it's Alex Lofer from Volokongen, Owen and Marius Formula. Jerome with a good start in P5, rounding out the top 5 on lap number 4 here. Here's Owen. Is he shaping up for a move? Just dangling the nose of that Alpine in a particularly menacing place underneath the rear wing of the McLaren, almost running into the back of him, going through the loop, and Volokongen is under some severe pressure here as we fly through Aintree flat out for the first time in the British Grand Prix. I don't think Owen, with no DRS, is going to be quite close enough to think about a move down into Brooklands.
But he may be getting impatient though, as Volokongen did not seem to get the tyres as fired up as the drivers around him. He's now in a desperate battle with Alex Lofer, trying to hang on to that DRS. That gap hovering just over 1 second, tantalisingly close. And both these guys, Tom, are using massive amounts of battery. So that is already a big proxy war going out there on the circuit at the moment. But the gap just over a second to the good at the moment, just as we're going to head into that second lap. DRS will be activated, and at the moment Alex Lofer is looking supreme out there. Very well timed dump of the battery. He used virtually all of it in this first lap. He's managed to get away, and that may provide that opportunity for Owen to move past Volokongen, who seems quite unable to get those tyres as fired up as some of the drivers around.
Absolutely blasted off into the distance and already broken the DRS to the McLaren behind, and now it's up to see what the response of Volokongen is to try and get himself back into contention here. And he's had a good Vale chicane, but Alex Lofer flying away out of the penultimate corner. Through club we go, 1.1 seconds the advantage as we start lap number 5. Volokongen is just inside the 1 second window as it's his turn to dump a load of battery going down the Hamilton straight, and through Abbey we go. It's touch and go whether he's going to get the DRS, and could just leave Owen standing still a little bit as well, because the Alpine needs to get his skates on, make sure that he stays in the DRS range of the McLaren in front. That looks like a pretty foregone conclusion, but Volokongen is 1.001. Does he have the DRS open? Yes, he just about does, and the alarm bells, for the time being at least, can just be silenced for the McLaren driver.
Well, he's not out of the woods just yet. He's got to try and keep Alex Lofer with him just in front. The next detection point is heading into the entry of the Maggots and Beckett section, so the gap just about 0.8 of a second. He's managed to equalise that pace, just didn't burn as much of his battery straight out the blocks in the same sense that Alex Lofer did, and managed to make up for it by going on the battery later on. Owen has kept much more of his battery in hand. He's kind of allowed these guys to fight their own battle up front and hasn't been really in danger of getting dropped. Volokongen looks like he's managed to salvage it though. He's about 0.8 behind. He's going to take some time back on this hanger straight, so it looks as though Volokongen is just about in the clear for now, as the train runs quite substantially down the field, down to Yasir Saki. So a couple of the hard runners have managed to stay in contention, but the rest of them have been gobbled up by Kazezel, who has carved his way through the rear of the field. And spinning up behind him is Dirk in the Ferrari off the road at Stowe Corner. Didn't quite catch the start of it, but certainly caught the end, and Dirk way off the road and seemingly out of contention unless a safety car comes to save his day. But Dirk in the Ferrari going off and straight into the pit lane. I think that is going to be a retirement, and it is. So that is the Ferrari out of the running in this race. We're down to 18 runners out there now.
First driver to take an early shower without having their left front tyre ripped off in an instant. And look at this, Silo looking pretty racy underneath the rear wing of the Mercedes of Jerome. 5th and 6th at the moment, but they could be trading blows as we go down the Wellington straight. The Sauber gaining all the time, both of them with the DRS flaps open, but it looked like the Mercedes just about had the straight line speed advantage to keep Silo at arm's length for the time being and hold on to that 5th position, just with the 2 Alpines and then the 2 leaders of Alex Lofer and Volokongen nestled in front. No real breaks in the main DRS train until, like you said, Yasisaki in P13, who's dueling away with his teammate Kazizu, who's been absolutely rapid on this restart with those medium compound tyres. Whether his progress will start to stall shortly as he gets to the front of that DRS train and has to do all of the hard work himself, the legwork himself, to get back up to the leading group of 12 that have ever so slightly broken away. We'll just have to wait and see. Just under 0.7 of a second the margin out in front. Alex Lofer's comfortable as we go down the hanger straight and into Stowe Corner. He's not going to be under any form of pressure from Volokongen behind, as things are very stable for the time being, as Lafferty leaving the session after his early retirement.
Yeah, things have stabilised up at the front, and both these guys are recovering a bit of battery after that mammoth effort from both Alex Lofer and Volakongen to get out of the blocks. Alex Lofer has abandoned that opportunity to try and break the race up and now settling into a bit more of a race rhythm. Everyone following each other at about half a second distance, so hard to find immediate chances of an overtake, and yet it does look like these guys are going to settle into the race. Now, in a race without a safety car to throw things up early out the blocks, you'd expect to see pit stops actually starting from around about now and getting onto those hard tyres. They can go that distance, and of course you want to try and grab an undercut. With the safety car, these guys, they may be staying out just a couple of laps longer before they decide to get a fresh set of boots out there. So expect maybe these guys to hold off just a little bit longer, but where these guys do decide to pit is going to play a very big role in how this race may be decided further down the road. We're already seeing as they settle into this DRS train, it's hard to approach, it's hard to pressure, it's hard to pass. So maybe some of the guys who maybe feel a bit out of position, maybe Oscar down in P8, will try and pounce, try and get that opportunity to get through in the pit cycle and just try and hang on near the end. So pit stops are going to be coming relatively soon. We'll see how they're going to shake up the race.
That safety car, though, did provide a great opportunity for the drivers on the mediums to just extend that stint ever so slightly and leave themselves a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the strategy aspect of this race. The battle for 13th rages on between the two green machines. Yasisaki on the hards, Kazizel on the mediums. And Yasisaki, whilst not troubling the apex at all of Stowe Corner, not under any real pressure from his teammate, who does begin to start bearing down his neck. But going into the Vale chicane, I think it's going to be another few corners before Kazizel can really try and think about getting back ahead of his teammate. I think at one stage Kazizel did get past Yasisaki, but maybe was caught up in that Dirk instant where we saw the Ferrari spinning off into the gravel going through Stowe and just losing himself a little bit of time and a couple of positions as well.
Well, he's got to try and make use of the DRS. He does have pretty much a full battery to use to try and catapult himself up towards the train in front, but in scrapping away with Yasuo Saki, that gap has went from just about 1.5 seconds to more than double that distance, and I don't think he's going to be near enough into Brooklands either. So this medium charge, as you said it might, Tom, is starting to stall for Kazizel, and I wonder if it's going to be another wild offbeat strategy from Kazizel that ends up working against him. He's got a few laps still left of this stint to try and make up the difference, but at the moment he is locked behind his teammate who just cannot seem to live with the group in front. Also, very good mention to Tony Roche, has showed very good pace on the hards, while every other hard runner has been gapped from this train led by Alex Lofer and trailed by all the medium runners. He's managed to keep himself very much in place, still in that DRS range, and now of course as the mediums begin to degrade, he's coming more and more into his own, so he's managed to stay in there. He will lose out a little bit with the undercut, but he is keeping himself very nicely in play as Kazizel finally gets the best of Yasuo Saki and now will try and hunt down the drivers in front.
It will be interesting to see if Tony Roche, as this stint progresses, will he start to just try and pick off a few of the drivers in front of him, because of course he's going to be at somewhat of a disadvantage because those drivers on the mediums will pit earlier, so they will undercut Tony Roche unless he decides to come into the pits at the same time. So that'll leave Tony Roche with a bit of work to do in the second half of this Grand Prix. The trade-off of course is he'll be on the medium tyre, so should have a pace advantage, but it's just that he's going to have a lot of overtaking to do. That's where a poor qualifying could just leave you in the dust ever so slightly. A lot of work to do when you are starting down the field. He might be starting to think about making some moves now because he's very close, tucked up underneath the rear wing of Azam, but isn't quite close enough to make a move down into Brooklands. Things very staccato at the moment in this leading group of 12. I think Finlay has been under the cosh a little bit. That gap has extended out to sort of 8 or 9 tenths of a second, just clinging onto the coattails of Silo in front. But Finlay in 10 hasn't really been under too much pressure from the championship leader Oscar behind.
Of course, the only real danger he does face is potentially getting dropped out of range. He's just hovering about 8 tenths of a second, so not much wiggle room. But yeah, overtaking already proving to be extremely difficult. Following, as it turns out, does seem very hard here at the Silverstone circuit. And again, that might be a bit of a catalyst for some of the drivers further back in this train to try and take advantage by coming into the pit lane. As we head towards the end of lap 9, we're getting towards that point where we could see pit stops, and my, we are seeing pit stops. Cars streaming into pit lane. Mario's Formula is the first of them as Jeroen picks up a time penalty. Just a little bit over the limit, of course. The speed limit 20 k's an hour lower here than it is at most other circuits. And for a man that was running very well in the Mercedes of Jeroen, that is going to be a better blow to his chances in this race, especially with the field running so close. It's going to be hard tyres, of course, for pretty much the entirety of this train, led out by Mario's Formula, so he was unable to really pressure the leading trio. Now gets himself a fresh pair of boots. The undercut can be very, very powerful here. He's going to get up to speed, and we'll see what the man from Cyprus can do. So first pit stops out of the main train. Mario's Formula emerges with perfect clean air, but Jeroen, that has got to be an absolute stagger to the heart, because again, with the field so closely bunched up together, it's hard to see a way back in now.
And now he's got a gaggle of cars all over the back of him. Jeroen not troubling any apex as we went through Village and the loop. He's got a kick Sauber of Silo bearing down on him. DRS flap open for the Sauber. This should be easy as you like. And before we even get to the braking zone of Brooklands, Silo takes 15th place off the hands of Jeroen and pushes that Mercedes down the order and just piling even more misery on a driver whose race was looking so strong, holding P5 very comfortably. And now he's got to deal with a very feisty looking Haas of Finlay as well. So not been a very good 60 seconds, it has to be said, for Jeroen, but still a long way to go in this race, not even at half distance. And if there is a safety car late on, that gives him an opportunity to serve that penalty and get himself back into contention. Finlay not troubling the circuit at all, though, going through Copse Corner. Race leader into the pits, but we're side by side through Maggots, Beckett and Chapel. And it's Oscar who gets the move done. He only needed Maggots Corner as Zinedine repeats the same blunder that befell Jeroen, and he's actually out of the race. So he's just sacked it off there and then. That's not ideal at all there for the Sauber driver, and he'll be the third that'll be taking that early shower. But yeah, mistake from Finlay going through Copse Corner. Oscar lapping it up with a knife and fork because it was handed to him on a plate.
And he's been trying to pressure Finlay throughout the entirety of this Grand Prix so far, so we'd be very relieved to get that manoeuvre over the line. I'm watching, though, for the drivers just exiting pit road. Of course, we saw Mario's Formula come in a little bit earlier, get the hard tyres on, but I have to say, those guys who stayed out a lap longer, they've held up very strongly. Alex Lofer and Volakongen with really good speed on the in-lap. They've managed to actually gap Mario's Formula, who doesn't seem to have made much progress at all relative to where he was. But Alex Lofer, though, he is trying once again to try and break Volakongen, and we could get another nip and tuck battle between the two of them, with Volakongen trying to stay in the DRS range of Alex Lofer, a bit further down the field on track. But in terms of net possession, this still means a whole lot in this race. Volakongen, though, he's within the range still, and he does have more battery than the Red Bull in front, which he's using now to close that gap back up. So looks as though he's managed to survive yet another assault on the outlaps from the Spaniard in front of him. So Alex Lofer still with Volakongen very much in tow, as Owen, a lap after the rest of his rivals, does decide to emerge into the pit lane, and we'll see where the Irishman is going to come out relative to those guys who've already come in.
And he'll probably be pretty satisfied to see that the undercut for his team at Mario's Formula has given him pretty much the square root of Jack down in P13, 1.6 seconds off the back of Alex Lofer and Volakongen. Now, for the sake of Mario's Formula's race, he's probably hoping that his teammate can slot directly in between himself and the Papaya McLaren that sits in front of him, because that'll keep Mario's Formula in the DRS train of what will become the leading group of 4 cars, with Silo 2.4 seconds off the back of Mario's Formula in what is now a second chasing peloton. Owen emerging from pit road. Is he going to be in a net third or a net fourth? Where is the twin Alpine car? He is behind his teammate, and that means they're going to have to work together to try and overcome this 4/10 deficit. 3/10 deficit is just hovering around that mark to the DRS of Volakongen in front.
And these two are certainly taking that opportunity. They're back on their overtake buttons. They know that this could be a very crucial gap over the two chasing Alpines. Mario's Formula himself has made a very big effort to try and get back in. He hasn't quite managed it so far. Owen was running very comfortably in the first stint. He's got fresh tyres to use, but now just a little bit more of a tense race situation for the former championship leader, the only repeat winner of this season so far, trying to track down his teammate, who's working pretty well, it has to be said, trying to chase that gap down. Mario's Formula, who had a poor run off the line, he's now trying to undo that damage with the undercut. He didn't quite get in DRS of the two drivers in front, but I have to say, he's working very, very hard and going very, very fast. throughout the middle of this lap, working his way back towards Volakongan and Alex Lofer in front, as Silo behind, about 2 seconds of a gap behind Owen. Looks as though he's going to have a much harder time too of working his way back in as these four begin to break clear at the front. So a tense battle this time. Volakongan on the other side of it, trying to resist the car behind, but Marius Formula is absolutely flying this lap, working his way back towards the top two in terms of net position.
Trying to wrestle back a little bit of control in this race, and he's done it very, very effectively, hustling the car through Stowe, through the Vale chicane and through Club, and he's got his rewards for it. 9/10 of a second, the gap between himself and the McLaren. Got to keep it neat and tidy through Sector 1, but he can reform this DRS train of what is now a leading group of 4, and it could just retain an exclusive group of 4 battling for the race win. Barring any late race safety cars, it looks like it's going to come down to Alex Lofer, Volakongan and the 2 Alpines, as you've got to take your hat off to Mario's Formula there. He has worked his absolute trousers off to get back into the 1 second window of Volakongan, needed to overcome a near half a second deficit, and he has done that.
He has done that to very good effect, and well, you mentioned whether the Alpines may need to work together to bridge that gap. In the end, there was no contribution needed from Owen. He's managed to get himself straight into play as well. The gap to Silo still holding around 2 seconds. It's not over yet for these guys behind, as it doesn't look like Alex Lofer is making a huge effort to try and break further and further clear. So just like we saw in Imola, there is the possibility of drivers working their way back in after being distanced. So keep an eye out on that, as we do get a pit stop from Kazezel. Still a couple of drivers extending their mediums as long as they will seemingly physically go. Raidadel and Azem still out there on them, tracked very closely by Tony Roche. Very intrigued to see what strategy the Frenchman is going to run with in this race, currently running P3 on the road. Of course, these guys in the net lead battle may have to worry about some of the drivers in front who are still extending on those hard tyres. Alex Lofer is just 2 seconds behind Hazara on the track, and well, we know, we've seen it many times in league racing, how much of an impact drivers on different strategies, slower drivers out on track, how much of a difference that can make on a chasing pack. So Alex Lofer is drawing very quickly towards the Norwegian Hazara, and how much of an impact he could have on this lead battle cannot be understated, depending on where these guys catch him and where these guys will attempt to pass him.
100%, and the Williams could most definitely be the joker in the pack as our 4 aces continue to chase him down at quite a lick, as that gap is just going to dip under 1 second for the first time as we go through Kopp's corner. And now this changes the game ever so slightly. Alex Lofer will get some DRS on the run down into Kopp's corner, and there will just be some slight alarm bells for Volakongan here, because Alex Lofer, you would imagine, is going to blast past Haza, and if that Williams stays out, Volakongan could find himself balked a little bit in the final sector. The Williams pulls all the way over to the left hand side and gets clean out of the way of the race leader, and well, that is very sporting, I have to say, from Haza, not getting involved one bit with the leading battle, as the top 3 will file down pit road. Raidadel, Azem and Tony Roche respectively making their final stops for the Grand Prix.
Yeah, as expected, Tony Roche not having any illusions of extending those hards all the way to the end of the Grand Prix. So he decides to get a fresh set of boots on as Alex Lofer sets the fastest lap of the race. He'll be, I think, a bit miffed there, because he would have seen an opportunity to create some separation from the drivers behind. And in the end, well, he just runs, as it were, with Volakongan, Marius Formula and Owen chasing very closely and behind with very little change to the race situation. Those were the drivers who extended long, just filtering back out. Raidadel, Azem and Tony Roche, who now puts on a set of the medium compound tyres. Now, he lost a lot, of course, by staying out a bit longer, but this is a very intriguing strategy to use as Azara pulls out right of the way of the chasing pack as well. Again, incredibly sporting, and well, I would say almost extremely sporting, given the fact that he's not even lapped. He has no obligation to get out of the way, and yet he still does so. So Hazara pulls nicely out the way of all the drivers on much fresher tyres, and has very little impact on the race, as it were. So we're running with a bit of a fractured field, many groups of about 3 or 4 out there. Fraser leading the way at the moment of the drivers on the hard tyres, who may extend just a couple laps longer. We shall see. Alex Lofer chasing in behind, and these drivers will be hoping that these 4 up the front have just as little impact on the lead battle as Hazara did.
How do you play this if you're Volokongan? We've seen so far on F124 the strategy was very simple. Get in second position going on to the last lap, blast past with the DRS and battery, take you in, lovely job, move on to next week. Now that's not always been the case. We've seen in the early races the driver in second hasn't been able to move past going on to the last lap, and actually a week ago in Imola, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, it was Oscar making the move on the penultimate lap of the Grand Prix, catching Tony Roche, it was then, slightly unawares around the outside of Tamburello, and then a mistake for Tony Roche, putting him out of contention. Alex Lofer wasn't really in the same ballpark going on to the last lap, wasn't close enough to hold a candle to the McLaren. So interesting strategies and gameplays that could come into fruition as we go into the last 3 or 4 laps of this Grand Prix. Volokongan in prime position at the moment. He's going to be under the cosh though, because these two Alpine drivers, Owen in particular, will be desperate to try and pick up his 3rd win of the season and reassert his dominance at the top of the championship. But at the moment, Alex Lofer looking like a sure bet to take the championship lead.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how you can create an overtake, because at the moment the following distance is just too big. Of course, Volokongan, he's certainly got more pace in his locker should he decide to try and unlock it. That does come with risks, but it may be necessary if he wants to trouble Alex Lofer up at the front of this Grand Prix. That gap hovering around 0.7 of a second at the moment. It's certainly too early for him to be thinking, oh, is Owen trying to pressure. His teammate runs well off the road at Chapel Corner, manages to gather his Alpine back onto the circuit with just a little bit of time loss and a little bit of squeaky bum time as he tries to hang on to the drivers out in front. The drivers further out in front though in that lead quartet, or rather actually Fraser now very much out on his own out there ahead of Yasuo Saki. But that train, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, is being caught very rapidly now by our net race leaders, so maybe they will have that impact. That gap 2.4 seconds, and at the rate they're catching, they will be troubling these guys at the end of this lap. We are getting towards the point where these guys are going to be coming into the pits, I imagine, for a set of the mediums. But whether they decide to do that or not, we could see yet another impact on this lead battle as Alex Lofer slices away at the gap to the drivers in front. Let's see what they're going to do. Are they going to get in the way? Are they going to pit? Are they going to pull out of the way as Hazara did and continues to do as he let yet more drivers past him further down the field? So we'll see how this unfolds, but Alex Lofer is chomping down that gap very, very quickly.
And I wonder, just going back to the strategy chat, I wonder if those drivers that did pit under the safety car to bolt on the hard tyres maybe just have made a bit of an error here, because by my reckoning here, they're leaving themselves with an awful lot of work to do. Tony Roche has not made any progress since coming out of the pits. He's tucked up underneath the rear wing of Asm, but because overtaking has been so difficult in this race, track position seems absolutely king. So for these drivers that are trying to make an overcut work, come back at the drivers on the hard tyres later on in the Grand Prix, the likes of Fraser, the likes of Yasisaki, Lawrence and Nico Source, who surely on those hards cannot get to the end of this Grand Prix. I wonder if they're just leaving themselves with a little bit more work to do than they perhaps could have done. Alex Lofer now a second off the back of Nico Source. There's a late race safety car, of course. That changes the complexion and the dynamic of this race to no end as the reigning champion closes up to the back of Euro. He's going to get that place anyway, courtesy of the penalty the Mercedes has, as he gets very close down to the Vale chicane, just holding firm in P11 for the time being.
Trying to pressure. Oscar has seemed to have more race pace than his track possession is really reflected, but he spent the entirety of this race pretty much buried in traffic, so he's had very little opportunity to try and use that pace. I do wonder if these guys in the top 4 positions are thinking about trying to extend those hards to the end of the race. It would be certainly a mammoth feat, but we're getting so deep in the race that it's something you have to consider. At the very least, I'd agree with you that they are goal hanging, as it were, for a potential safety car to bring them right back into play. But what they're doing now is certainly having an impact on the drivers who have chased them down. Alex Lofer is right up behind. He's obviously got far more speed to use. We've seen plenty of evidence to support that. But how does he find his way past? Dirtier makes things very difficult. Does he fancy his chances heading towards Maggots? He's closing very close to the back of Nico Sauce, but can't quite find a move through just yet. Can he keep his Red Bull tucked underneath the rear wing of the Ferrari? Heading through Chapel, he does so very, very well. So Alex Lofer punches that throttle pedal, but so does Nico, and he has no intention of giving up this position, that is for sure. So Alex Lofer remains still locked down in 5th position. Is this the opportunity, I wonder, that Volokongan was looking for? 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 of them staying out yet another lap. They're being ballsy on strategy. Can Alex Lofer cut underneath, heading out and fail? He's oh so close to the Ferrari in front of him as they power over the line to start lap number 19, closing up towards Abbey. Can't quite get near enough. All over the rear wing now. He's got to try one, heading in towards Village Corner, gets up and alongside, and he may well just go through. Nico's going to try and hang it out there around the outside, gets the inside line for the loop. He holds it in there, but surely traction is going to go the way of the Red Bull, and it does. Alex Lofer sweeps through. Volakongan now in hot pursuit, trying to follow through. These are critical moments in this race. Volakongan to the inside, stands firm, and in the end he may just see that through. Nico Sauce is buried on the outside. In the end it looks like the McLaren is gonna get through. I'll hand over to you, Tom, as these net leaders swab the leaders out on track. Nico Sauce losing 2 positions out there as these drivers with much fresher tyres try and carve their way through.
Volakongan on the button, had to be done and got it done very efficiently. Wide goes Marius Formula through Copse Corner as he gets a face full of dirty air from the ailing Ferrari of Nico Sauce. Volakongan's done the first part of his job right. He's kept Alex Lofer within touching distance as the Red Bull is now tucked up underneath the rear wing of Lawrence, trying to take third place off the hands of the Silver Arrow. The Aston Martin of Yasusaki with no DRS. Look at it though. He's got so much more grip, so much more confidence, but with the DRS the Mercedes has got, Alex Lofer at least into the regulation overtaking places. Can't make any moves stick. The Alpine's trading blows though. That mistake from Marius Formula putting him on the back foot, and Owen says thank you very much and gets ahead of his teammate down through Stowe Corner.
And now he's got to try and find his own way past Nico Sauce, and he's got to do so quickly as Alex Lofer is setting up a move on Lawrence. Looks left and right down the straight, cannot quite find a way through. Much more speed heading through Abbey Corner. Can he find a way through? He's going to get trapped on the outside, heading in towards Village. Around the outside goes Alex Lofer. Can he finally put a car between himself and Volakongan? Still they stack up now behind Yasir Saki. Alex is tucked in right in the middle, but he does manage to slice his way past Lawrence. Now heading onto the straight immediately. The Aston Martin pulls to the side of the road as back comes Lawrence to the inside, lunging into Brooklands. These guys are not backing down, and Lawrence is taking that place. The door opens for Volakongan, who's sweeping right around the outside of Luffield. Can he snatch that position away from Alex Lofer? Alex Lofer squeezed towards the grass into Woodcote. Goodness me, how are they all still facing in the right direction? Lawrence reclaims the possession, absolutely not backing down. Alex Lofer wide, and Volakongan getting up and alongside towards Maggots, and Beckett's through goes the McLaren. Extraordinary scenes here on the 20th lap. Even Owen is trying to find his way through, heading through Beckett's. It is getting so feisty up at the front of this race as Volakongan picks the right spot at the right time, and no battery left for Alex Lofer as a setting duck is Owen cruises through, and now he's staring at the rear wing of the McLaren. Now a horrible lap for Alex Lofer.
Well, Alex Lofer, who arrived on the scene first, as down the inside goes Mario's Formula into the Vale chicane. Just hold that thought. Inside turns to outside. The Ferrari's put in his back pocket. Silo falling through as well. Around the outside of Club. Just enough space for the Sauber as the Ferrari and its Ferrari engine counterpart almost tango. Yorin around the outside of Abbey, and Nico Sauce is going to drop all the way to the back of this train and outside of the top 10. But Alex Lofer was caught short by that. He was boxed in between the dueling Yasir Saki and Lawrence, and it was Volakongan like a jack in a box around the outside of Luffield, taking the lead off his hands. They battle through Copse. Alex Lofer running wide, handing the net lead of the race to the McLaren, and Owen saying thank you very much as well, filing on past. Volakongan now just thinking about a move up the inside, but it's Lawrence still darting all over the place, ducking and weaving underneath the rear wing of Yasir Saki. These guys are fighting for what they believe is second and third in this race. Yes, these guys have got considerably fresher tyres. They're fighting for pride as Alex Lofer may be a little bit hot under the collar as he's perpendicular to the surface coming through Woodcote Corner. What order are we going to be? It's around the outside of Copse, is it? Not quite. Volakongan didn't have the overspeed to challenge the Mercedes, but look at this, pushing him on the exit of the corner. It's got to be through Magus, Beckers and Chapel. Surely not around the outside. Lawrence getting his elbows out. Volakongan runs out of space. Got to be careful of the Alpine behind.
I know we're loving this, but look at how this is helping SCI. Fraser leads by 5 full seconds. If he can get those stars to the end, who knows? Volakongan charging towards Lawrence yet again, but there's just no room to get through, and he's got to be careful as Owen increasingly pressures him. Poor exit for Lawrence though is going to open the door, and now to the other side. Owen to the inside of Vale Corner follows the McLaren. Brilliantly done. Owen has placed his car beautifully throughout this battle as Silo fighting away with Mario's Formula over the line, and Mario's Formula just going backwards at this stage. The Kick Server driver gets half a car length in front on the inside of Abbey and off the road goes the Alpine driver. He re-emerges, comes through the grass and ends up tucked in underneath the rear wing of the Kick Cerberus. Alex finally picks his way past Lawrence just up in front. He's still chasing down the drivers in front, but look at Fraser. Well, I don't know what condition his tyres are in, but he seems to have no intention of pitting. He remains out there as Oscar is challenging Mario's Formula Tom. I cannot keep up with all these battles out on track as two separate trains converge on each other. It's just creating absolute bedlam out there.
And worse still for Mario's Formula, gets a 3-second corner cutting penalty on the inside of Brooklands, and that's just a little bit lazy, you would imagine. Silo next on the scene to try and push Lawrence down a further spot. Is the Sauber fancying it around the outside? Yes, he does fancy it. Lawrence backing out of that one somewhat wisely and pushes him down into 7th position. Mario's Formula, Oscar, I think, flying off the circuit nose. The Mercedes of Uran struggling in the dirty air. This is absolute bedlam, like you said. Now Yasir Saki is the driver that's got to deal with all of this. Oscar, no, he's left the session. That's not good news for the championship leader, who surely is going to be deposed at this stage. Yasisaki ducking and weaving, trying to break the toe. Volokonga, is he going to have to go clean around the outside of Stowe Corner? He's got the grip, he's got the traction, he's got the confidence, and he puts Yasisaki for the time being behind him. But the Aston Martin having it out down the inside into the Vale chicane, dangles the front wing, the Aston Martin, in a place it's not welcome one bit. But it's Papaya McLaren ruling out in second now. Yasisaki to third. Oh, he's got so much more confidence through Club Corner. He's going to push Yasisaki out of the podium. Places Alex Lofer in hot pursuit of the Aston Martin as well. You feel it's going to have to be a very unregulation overtaking point. It's down into the braking zone of Village. The Aston Martin relinquishes P4 as well. And now we know the charge. 1, will Fraser's tyre survive? And 2, can Volokonga and Alex Lofer catch that Haas that's 5.5 seconds up the road?
Watch the gap tick down, and we're going to get a good sense as to how quickly these guys can make up the difference and whether it's going to be fast enough. Silo is the next driver to depose Yasir Saki, who seems to have run out of grip. These hard tyres are right at the end of their lifespan, that is for sure, as these guys who have extended now 21.5 laps on those tyres still soldiering on. They will not be in puncture territory just yet, I'd imagine, but there could be a potential threat in the last couple of laps. Fraser, though, what a bed he has made. This is almost reminiscent of what we saw from Ryerdal in the wet in Spa, just soldiering on a completely crazy strategy. Is it going to work out, though? That gap is coming down very rapidly. Is it quick enough, though? Just over 3 to go in this race. Volokongan leading the charge. Owen, well, he's focused on Volokongan. He's going to try and pick his way past when the opportunity does present itself, as Lawrence is way off the road. It's still corner. Didn't quite catch the start of that. He's got a puncture. He's got a puncture, does the Mercedes, on the same strategy as the race leader. So these guys are certainly in puncture territory. Lawrence bitterly disappointed for the Merc man, but that just demonstrates the danger that Fraser is in right now.
100%. He's going to see that, and he's just going to feel a little bit hot under the collar and a little bit concerned as the gap out in front continues to close at some considerable pace. Fraser, 22 laps on his hard tyres. He strapped them on at the end of lap number 1 under the safety car, and he's going to try and take them to the end of the Grand Prix. It's his best chance of winning for the first time this season, upsetting the monopoly that's been held by Oscar, by Owen and by Alex Lofer, 2 of them inside the top 4. Oscar disconnecting about 5 laps ago. His chances falling by the wayside. Asm, by the way, just on 9-lap old medium hard tyres, is coming out of absolutely nowhere. Mario's Formula continues to leak places. Through goes the Williams, through goes Ryerdal as well. Mario's Formula on the verge of maybe not even scoring any points here with Tony Richet and Finlay not too far away either. 3.8 seconds the gap. Oscar has rejoined the session, but it's not going to be to any avail because he's 16th and last and isn't going to be finishing inside the top 10. Can those hard tyres make it another 2.5 laps?
I'm riding all over with SCI Fraser, and my goodness, just look at the surface of that hard compound.
Oh.
It is crying for help out there. Can he see them through? It seems like almost impossible odds, and the gap is coming down so rapidly as slots his way past Yasir Saki again on such fresh tyres. And as all these guys have been involved in this manic battling out on track, these guys, the likes of Azim, Ryerdal, who falls him through, Anthony Richet, who went off strategy, extended and got a fresh set of boots on now, hard tyres on those 2 and mediums for Tony Richet. They are just carving their way through, have taken full advantage of this race situation. Just under 2 laps to go in this race, we have the man who nearly won the PSF2 Championship last season, holding off the best that PSF1 has to offer, chasing him down. It's just over 2 seconds. Fraser, I think, is almost certainly going to be caught. The question is whether these guys will be able to find their way through, and of course that question looming over the heads of everyone who's decided to take these hard tyres the distance, whether or not they will get to the end. Fraser is crawling around now. He is right on the limit here.
Got a lap and a half to do, but lost 1.8 seconds on the previous tour. And Volokongen at this rate is going to be right underneath the rear wing of the Haas as we start the final lap of the Grand Prix. That is, of course, bearing in mind that the Haas's tyres don't explode at some point during this lap. You would imagine, as we saw with Lawrence, it's going to be the front left that goes pop first, considering the loads that are put on that tyre around this configuration of circuit. We come through Maggots, Beckis and Chapel, all okay for the time being, but Fraser's got absolutely no grip left on that car. He's going to be driving with effectively square tyres. It'll feel like it's going to be sliding all over the place. Volokongen with a golden opportunity as the gap is now under 1.5 seconds. It's going to be a second, you would imagine, going on to the last lap. Fraser, I mean, my prayers go out to you, my friend, because I think it's just going to be one lap too long for you this Grand Prix.
Especially as Volokongen has 84% battery. He's got everything he needs to chase this Haas down. Oh, Fraser's round! Fraser is round, it's gone, it's the rear left is gone on Fraser's car. Oh, heartbreak right at the death for the Haas driver, but we knew he was pushing the limits, and in the end it has worked against Fraser. You have to feel for him. Now we cut towards what is now the battle for the win as Owen, has he found another golden opportunity right at the death, just like he did in Belgium? He closes on Volokongen, he's not going to be near enough. Heading in towards Brooklands though, and you'd have to imagine the one chance he's going to get is that famed run down towards Stowe Corner. Volokongen leads, Owen chasing him down, and the question is, it's what we discussed earlier, can he follow to this iconic high-speed section of track and set up a move on the McLaren down towards that third sector?
Well, if the race was 25 laps long, it'll be heading down to Haas, downtown to America, with Fraser pulling off what was almost the most audacious of audacious strategy, taking those hard tyres pretty much the entire race distance. But as his left rear went pop and he went cascading through the gravel at the start of the final lap, he's left it to Volokongen and to Owen to debate the victory as we come on to the Hangar Straight. But the Alpine just looks a little bit too far back. It can't be a move down to Stowe Corner. He's got one more opportunity, one more time they're going to hit the brakes on lap number 26. And that is the Vale chicane, but he's still way too far back, not in the same postcode. And Volokongen, he didn't start on the front row, he bided his time, but as others fell by the wayside, it is Papaya ruling in Silverstone. It is Volokongen who cuts the beam. A brilliant victory for the McLaren after his third a week ago. Owen and Alex Lofer, two championship protagonists, rounding out the podium. Silo with a brilliant drive to P4. Same said for Asman Ryderdal in 5th and 6th. Yasir Saki, hats off, my friend. You made those tyres last and picked up a decent haul of points. Cazizzo recovering to P8 ahead of Tony Richet. Mario's. It all started at the start. Poor getaway dropped him from 2nd to 4th, and things just continued to snowball from there as he finishes down in P10. Finlay Nico Source, your own with a 10-second penalty, tumbles through the field. Hazara and Oscar was the championship leader, but will lead no more as he'll be last of the classified runners.
And breathe. Wow, what a finale we've been treated to at Silverstone. It was really all set up by that lap 1 safety car. It enabled all those different strategies to converge late in the day, and well, we've been treated to some incredible battling out there in a race where overtaking was incredibly difficult. That strategy was able to bring so many different drivers into play, not least of course Fraser. Again, the heart goes out to the man because that was an incredible bid, but just like I compared it with Ryderdal in Belgium, and ultimately it's ended the same way in a last lap heartbreak for the Haas driver, but still a brilliant drive, it must be said. He battled on all the way to the end, but it was Volokongen, and I've said on multiple occasions Volokongen is an incredibly smart driver, makes all the right decisions, and the way he placed his car when they caught the drivers on the older hards was absolutely exquisite, and that's how he's picked his way through for this race win.
Ended a podium drought a week ago in Imola. Now ends the win drought as Volokongen returns to the top step. Fastest lap for Hazara. Driver of the day goes to Azim. Hazara with the most overtakes. And your cleanest driver goes to Owen for Alpine. Volokongen throwing himself right into contention for this championship as his teammate had his trials and tribulations. Owen and Alex Lofer rounding out your podium places. Silo, Azim, Ryderdal, Yasisaki, Kazizel, Tony Richet and Mario's Formula. Your top 10 point scorers. Provisionally, of course, although we didn't have any post-race penalties 1 week ago, so it'll be debatable whether we see any this week. But what a British Grand Prix we had on our hands. We had drivers trying to make the most unlikeliest of strategies work at the end. It worked for Yasisaki as he bagged a few points in P7. But Fraser, your heart goes out to him. He was 1 lap short of pulling off the impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine he's going to be putting in a request to get this race shortened to a 25-lap distance because, yes, that strategy would have been absolutely ideal if he had elected, if the race ended just a lap earlier. But that is why we do league racing. That is why we watch league racing, because it produces moments like that. And races like that all the way through. Of course, there were other strategies out there. Some of the drivers, of course, decided to stop it off of that safety car. Azem was rewarded with a brilliant 5th position on the track then, and was chasing down the net leaders towards the end with much fresher tyres. Again, benefited from all that kerfuffle down there between two competing trains converging. And Azem was certainly making his way back in, so credit to the Turk as well for getting himself back into play. This has been an incredible race to witness, and a brilliant win from Volakongen. I believe it will be Owen who will snatch the championship lead back away from Oscar. Again, we have to feel for Oscar too. Bitterly disappointing and bad luck with that very badly timed disconnection, unfortunately. So Owen, well, almost kicking off where he left off, was just denied the race win, but ultimately reclaimed that spot he had after the Belgian Grand Prix. He is back at the top of the tree leading this PSF1 championship.
Of course, makes it 4 different winners in the first 5 races, which just gives us a nice little thing to think about going into Budapest next week. I've said it for the last 3 weeks. I think that is going to be an absolute sweat fest. If you thought the first half of this Grand Prix was all about trying to stay as close as possible to the drivers in front, struggling with the dirt, keeping it in the DRS train, well, hold your horses, everybody, because Budapest, I think, is going to be something on a completely different level to that. Dan, if we can talk about the Hungarian Grand Prix, in real life it traditionally produces some pretty decent Grand Prix. In the game, where overtaking seems to be quite a lot harder on this game than it was on F1 24, can we maybe count the number of on-track overtakes we'll see on one hand?
Potentially, unless we do get some crazy and wacky strategies like we saw today, and maybe caused by a safety car to really throw things up in the air. Yeah, I do think overtaking, with no exaggeration, is going to be extremely difficult to create because, well, even here at Silverstone, we have a lot of high-speed corners that make it difficult to follow. Hungary has a lot of those mid-speed, sort of high-load corners that are also very difficult to follow, and far less weaponry really at your disposal to create a move. Just the short DRS straight down towards turn 1 and that little kicker towards turn 2 are really the only spaces that you can create outside of the first lap. So yeah, I do think that unless we get some sort of a unique variable coming into play, we're going to have a race with very limited passing and a very, very important qualifying session, I expect, to come in a week's time.
100%. And if there's rain, that'll make it even more interesting. And it could be something similar to this week, because for the first 14 or 15 laps, we were waiting for this race to catch fire, and then seemingly an arsonist got hold of it, and it absolutely exploded into carnage in the second half of the Grand Prix with the alternate strategies, people trying to make that effective one-stop work, but couldn't quite get it all the way to the end. With the exception of Yasir Saki, of course, who finished in P7 on 25-lap-old hard tyres. Just to have a quick gander at the calendar for the next couple of weeks, we're almost halfway through season number 40. Obviously, we head to the Hungaroring next week, and then Bahrain at the end of August before our week break until our 5-race stretch to end off season number 40. The big 4-0 with the Circuit of the Americas, then Suzuka Las Vegas. That could be carnage considering what we've seen today. Interlagos as a penultimate round, and then Mexico City finishing us off as we will head into season 41. And that will complete the first season on the F1 24 game cycle. Dan, I mean, normally I'd like to think about trying to pick a moment of the Grand Prix, but I mean, I don't think we've got enough fingers to count them. I don't think we can remember all of them. Absolute carnage in those last 10 laps. I don't think anybody expected that after qualifying.
No, and I was going to say, if I was going to pick a moment, it would be just a snapshot of the entire last 10 laps. Can you count that a moment? I'm going to.
Yeah, go for it.
A moment's not a defined amount of time, so we'll go with that. And because the action was just continuous absolutely constant. And again, maybe we did need that variable, because as we saw when everyone was running normally, we didn't get a huge amount of wheel-to-wheel action. But when we got that variable, and when we got all those drivers converging on the track, all those different strategies, it just made for an enthralling spectacle in every sense of the word. I mean, league racing on this game, it's not quite as fast, it's not quite as frantic as it was certainly on F1 24, and to some extent I would say that's a good thing, but oh wow, you can't help but love what we just saw. So many cars in such close proximity, swapping so often that we as commentators are almost powerless to follow it, but we will do the best we can, and yes, I think we've been treated to an absolute barnstormer of a race, and hopefully by some miracle Hungary is going to be able to follow that.
We can all cross our fingers and hope that Hungary will be slightly more interesting than we are perhaps thinking it might be. But that is just about it for us. Different week, still nobody that wants to talk to us in the interview waiting room. We will get someone for the season finale. The champion will speak to us. I will make it an absolute rule. But just to round us off, Dan, pleasure as always from my side to commentate with you on the old social medias. Where can people find you out and see what you're up to?
People can find me just on Twitter at the moment. So that is at Daka23, which is capital D, lowercase a, capital K, lowercase e, capital H23. If you check me out, that would be much appreciated.
Make sure you do. Make sure you get involved. If you're interested in what I'm doing on Twitter, it's TW06, and on Twitch as well. And on Instagram and TikTok, it is wilco.darts and wilco.coms. But barnstorming Britain, I think that's the best way to put it. We didn't expect what was going to happen in the final 5 laps. Absolute carnage. We were almost treated to the impossible for Fraser, taking 25 laps on a hard tyre and winning the Grand Prix. In the end, though, it was Papaya ruling strong, as we've seen so many times in the year of 2025. Volakongen ending a win drought and picking up his first of the season, first for a little while. Championship still very much on for 4 drivers now. Toner is shared a little bit far back. But until next week, pleasure as always. Make sure you check out PC. It'll be coming in 3 days' time on Thursday. But until then, we will see you very, very shortly. Good night.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me.
Down the inside, absolutely impossible scene. This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He needs to get it done now.
Blakey will dive to the inside.
We were robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronar takes the lead.
Because here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Jarno Watmere is your champion.